There is a table at the end of the bar on Soi 7 in Pattaya that has my name on it, in the way that certain tables in certain bars have a man's name on them, which is to say, nobody wrote it, nobody declared it, and everyone knows it. I should give you the English context before I give you the Thai one, because the English context is the reason the Thai one cost what it did. I was married twice. The first marriage ended in 1994 when my daughter was 2, and I am not going to apportion blame except to note that a car salesman who works 6 days a week and who brings the salesman home with him is a specific kind of domestic experience, and that my first wife was correct to conclude that the experience was not for her. My daughter Claire is 40 now, in Shrewsbury, and we have the relationship available to a father and daughter who were in the same city for the first 10 years of her life, and in different ones since, which is warmer than an outsider would expect, and less close than either of us would prefer, and it is what it is. The second marriage was to a woman I will not name, who was not interested in cars or car sales or the version of myself that the car sales had produced, and who was not wrong about any of those positions, and who in 2014 decided that 20 years was sufficient evidence for her conclusion. The house in Solihull was ours, and then it was divided, and the proceeds of the division, after the arrangement was settled, were the £140,000 with which I arrived in Pattaya in 2017, which is the most specific thing I can say about what 24 years in Solihull eventually produced. I want to tell you about the 2 women from Ladywood who have died since I left, because they are relevant and because I have been thinking about them. My mother died in 2019. I flew back for the funeral, 3 days, and returned, and my Aunt Doreen died in 2022, and I did not fly back because I calculated the cost and the timing against the Pattaya life and decided the timing was wrong, and I have thought about that calculation at least twice a week since, and I am telling you this not as self-punishment, but because it is in the accounting, and the accounting in this recording is total. There is a table at the end of the bar on Soi 7 in Pattaya. I have been sitting at that table for 7 years. For the first 6 of those years I sat there as the man who bought the drinks. For the past 14 months, I have been sitting there as the man who nurses a beer. The beer costs 80-baht. I am aware of the 80-baht in a way that I was not aware of the 800 I used to spend in the same sitting, which is perhaps the most concise description of what happened to me that I can produce. My name is Norman. I am 68 years old, I am from Ladywood in Birmingham originally, and for 24 years I sold cars at a dealership in Solihull, and I was, if you will permit me one statement of historical fact before everything else, the best car salesman in the West Midlands in 1998, 1999, and 2003, which I know because the plaques are in a box in the wardrobe of my rental room. The plaques are the only things that remained the same between 6 years ago and today. Everything else has contracted. Let me give you the 2 men, because the 2 men is the structure of this recording and the only way I know to hold it honestly. I should tell you something about the room first, because the room is the 3rd character in this recording and it deserves description. The Soi 7 bar where I have sat for 7 years is not the kind of place that appears in travel writing or in the stories men tell when they are trying to make Thailand sound better than the truth. It is a modest bar on a side street with a pool table that is always in use and that I have never played, plastic chairs, a ceiling fan that works on 2 of its 3 settings, and a television showing Thai football most evenings. The people who come there are expats of the long-stay variety, the men who have been here between 5 and 15 years, and who have made their accommodation with the country, and the country's accommodation with them, and who do not, for the most part, go to the nicer places anymore, because the nicer places are full of tourists who have not made their accommodation yet, and whose noise has a different quality. It is a room of people who have decided to be here, and the deciding gives them a specific character, which is the character of people who have stopped performing for anyone. Except me. I performed for that room for 6 years. I was the only one performing in the sense of actively managing how I was perceived, and I was the one buying the drinks, and the connection between the performing and the buying is what this recording is about, and it is not a connection that any of the other people in the room would have described, because from their side of the table I was simply Norman who buys the drinks, and Norman who buys the drinks is a straightforward and welcome phenomenon, and the analysis is mine and they did not ask for it. Let me give you the two men, in Pattaya in 2017, with £140,000 from the sale of his house in Solihull, a 3-bedroom semi that he had owned since 2001 and that had done the work that British semi-detached do when you buy them at the right time, which is to quietly and without drama become worth considerably more than you paid, and a pension from the car dealership of approximately £1,140 a month, which is a pension that says we value your contribution without specifying how much. He had a plan. He had researched Pattaya online in a way he now acknowledges was thorough about the wrong things and shallow about the right ones, and his research had produced the reasonable conclusion that £140,000 in a city where the currency is 43 baht to the pound was a substantial buffer, and that his pension would cover living costs, and that he was, at 61, a man who had arrived at the right moment in the right place. The second man is sitting at the end of the bar on Soi 7, with 80 baht of beer, 14 months into the new arrangement, and he has approximately £19,000 left, and his pension covers the rent and the food and the medical and the phone and nothing else, and if the pension stopped, he would be on a plane in 30 days. Those are the two men, and I will tell you how one became the other. I was a car salesman. I want to stay on that for a moment, because it explains more than you might expect. Before Solihull, Birmingham. I grew up in Ladywood, which in the 1970s was not a place that suggested the Solihull dealership or the West Midlands plaques, and I want to say that without drama, because the drama is not the point. The point is that the trajectory from Ladywood to 3 plaques and a house in Solihull was a trajectory I built by being, consistently, the man in the room that other people were glad to have there. I learned this at 16 working a market stall on the Hagley Road, where the owner would say to me at the end of a good Saturday, "Norman, you could sell a wet coat in a drought," and I took this as the highest possible praise, and have done so for 52 years. The car dealership was the natural destination of a man with that skill in the English Midlands of the 1990s, and I was good at it, and the goodness was real, and I want to note that the plaques are not fiction. I earned them in competition with other men who were also good, and I won 3 years of the 4 I entered, and the winning was clean. What the skill also produced, across 24 years of applying it every day, was a man who had come to depend on the room approving of him, and who, when that approval arrived too easily and at too low a cost, which is what Pattaya offers a man with money in a bar where he is the one with the most, had no apparatus for recognizing the danger. The skill and the danger were the same thing. The plaques are in the wardrobe. I was a car salesman. I want to stay on that for a moment, because it explains more than you might expect. In car sales, the fundamental skill is not the pitch. Every customer has heard the pitch. Every customer expects the pitch. The pitch is the furniture. The fundamental skill is the room. You read the room. You read the man who comes in on a Saturday morning in a jacket that is slightly too good for the car he is looking at, and you understand that the jacket is the signal and the car is the pretext, and you sell him the jacket's car, which is the one above the one he inquired about. You read the couple where the wife is doing the driving and the husband is doing the talking, and you address your closing arguments to the wife. You read the first-generation man who has worked himself into the position of being able to afford something his father could not, and you understand that what he is buying is the story he will tell his son, and you sell him the story. 24 years of this produced in me a very particular skill, the ability to create, in any room I entered, the version of myself that the room wanted to exist. In a Birmingham car showroom, that skill made me the best in the West Midlands in 1998, 1999, and 2003. In a bar on Soi 7 in Pattaya, it made me the big shot, and the big shot is an identity with a significant running cost, and I ran it for 6 years, and the cost was £121,000. I will give you the number properly, but first I need to give you Barry, because without Barry the number lacks its essential context. Barry is 64, from Wolverhampton, and he arrived in Pattaya 6 months after me in early 2018, and he and I met at the Soy 7 bar in my second month there, and I bought him a drink because I buy people drinks, and in the following weeks I bought him several more. And Barry, who is a man of measured shrewdness and who would never in his life pay for something that someone else is offering, accepted all of them with the specific grace of a man who understands the social architecture of generosity and who has decided to be its beneficiary. Barry is not a bad man. Barry is a man who recognized, early, that Norman buys the drinks, and who settled into that recognition with the comfort of long experience, and who still comes to the table on Soy 7 most evenings, and who accepts the beer that I no longer offer. He and I have been friends, in the specific meaning available to two men of our generation who share an evening routine without ever discussing anything important, for 7 years. He has not once, in 7 years, asked me whether I am all right. I have not once asked him. This is not cruelty on either side. It is the operating terms of the friendship we have, and the terms have not changed, and the only thing that has changed is that the drinks are not coming anymore, and Barry has quietly redistributed his drink accepting toward two other men at the bar, whose running cost he has correctly assessed as sustainable. He does this without malice and without any particular awareness that it is happening, the way a plant redistributes toward available light. I find Barry, in retrospect, one of the most instructive people I have known, which is not something I expected to feel about a man from Wolverhampton who has never bought me a drink. He has been in Pattaya 11 years, and he has his pension, and he has his room, and he has his Tuesday evenings, and he has whatever Barry has when he is not at the bar on Tuesday evenings, which I do not know because we have never discussed it, and none of it has cost him more than the room, and the food, and the bus fare, and the one beer per evening he stretches to 3 hours. If I had observed Barry in 2017, with the same attention I gave to the customers in Solihull, I would have seen a man who was demonstrating, unintentionally and without any pedagogical intent, that the room was glad to have him for free. I did not observe Barry with that attention in 2017. I was busy being the big shot. He was busy accepting the drinks. We were, each of us, doing exactly what we were built to do, and one of us was spending £121,000 doing it. Now the number. £121,000 across 6 years. I want to go through it by year rather than by category, because the years tell the story better than the categories, and the story is about a rate of change that the categories disguise. Let me tell you one more thing about Barry, because Barry is the most honest mirror in this recording. Barry is a man of genuine and unaffected ease. He is at peace with himself in the way that men who have made peace with their limitations are at peace. And his limitation is that he has never in his life bought a round unless the social pressure to do so was absolute and visible. I know this because I have watched him, across 7 years, execute the specific maneuver of the non-round buyer with a precision that I would have admired as a sales technique in any other context. The slightly delayed response to the question of what he is having, the drift toward the bar at a moment when the round has already been committed, the expression of gratitude that is genuine without being excessive. He is not a fraudster. He is a man who has correctly identified that Norman buys the drinks, and who has arranged himself, without consciousness or plan, to be in range when Norman buys them. I am not angry at Barry about this. I am angry at myself for spending 6 years in the presence of a man who was demonstrating, every evening, that the room was happy to have him in it for no money at all, and for not learning the lesson until I had no money to learn it with. Barry is the most expensive free thing I have ever seen. My daughter Claire rang in December. We speak on alternate months, roughly, and the December call was one we had both been putting off, because the December call was the first one since I told her the capital was gone, in October, in an email which I regret the format of, but which I could not face as a phone call. She was kind. She is her mother's daughter, and her mother is a kind woman, and Claire has inherited the kindness without being required to also inherit the patience. And she said, after asking about the practical arrangements, and establishing that I was not about to do anything alarming. "Dad, was it worth it?" And I said the truest thing I could say to a 40-year-old woman about a 68-year-old man's 6 years on a bar stool in Pattaya, which is, some of it was, and she said she was glad some of it was. And then she said she hoped I was eating properly, and I said I was, which is true. The market is still there. The cowman guy is still excellent. The stall woman still nods when I appear. And that is the version of the smaller life that I want to end on, not because it is the whole picture, but because it is the part that is mine, in a way the table never quite was. Now the number. £121,000 across 6 years. Year 1, 2017. I spent approximately £24,000, of which the rent, food, transport, and living was perhaps £9,000, and the bar was £15,000. I should give you the good years properly, because this is the category that most often reduces the good years to a footnote, and the good years were the whole point. I moved into a condo on Solihull initially, and then to a better one nearer Second Road in 2018, 32,000 baht a month, which at the rates of the time was about £700, which was comfortable without being extravagant. I had the mornings for myself. I walked the beach road at 6, when it was still manageable, and ate at a market that I found in my first week, and at which I became, over 6 years, the regular foreigner who knew which stall had the better cowman guy, and who tipped correctly, and who was greeted. I found a gym and went 3 mornings a week, which I had not done since my 30s in Solihull. I found a barber I liked. I found a tailor who knew my measurements. I had my health checked annually at a private hospital, and the results were consistently what a man who does not smoke, and who walks every morning, and who eats at a market would expect. In the evenings I went to Soya 7 and I was the big shot. And the big shot is not a costume I put on at 7 and took off at midnight. He was, for 6 years, who I was, and who I had been working toward becoming since the Hagley Road Market in 1972, when I sold a wet coat in a drought, and the owner said Norman and I understood, at 16, exactly what the name was for. Year 1, 2017. I spent approximately £24,000. The bar figure for year 1 does not seem alarming when I tell it. £15,000 is about £300 a week, which is £40 a night 6 nights a week, which is 8 drinks for the table, which is a reasonable number for a man of 61 who has sold cars for 24 years and who has been waiting his whole adult life to be the man in the room who says drinks are on me. I want to be precise about what that felt like in year 1, because it is the engine of everything else. On a car dealership salary in Solihull, I was a comfortable man, but comfortable is not the same as expansive. Expansive requires surplus, and my Solihull surplus, after the mortgage and the household running costs and the reasonable expectations of a man who sold cars at a quality dealership, was perhaps £300 or £400 a month that I could move freely. In Pattaya in year 1 I had, at the bar rate I was spending, the feeling of a man for whom the constraint had been removed, and the removal of the constraint is a very specific sensation, and it does not come with a warning, and the man who feels it for the first time at 61, after a lifetime of comfortable calculation, is more at risk than any man I have met, including the ones who come here desperate. Year 2, 2018, 28,000. But before I give you the years, I want to give you the feeling of year 1 more precisely, because the feeling is what produced the years. In a car showroom, the transaction is clear. A man comes in, money moves, a car leaves. The salesman's commission is deposited on the 15th. The transaction is bounded and complete, and the approval of the customer, though genuinely experienced as warmth, has a source in the invoice. In the Soy 7 bar in 2017, I discovered a form of approval with no invoice underneath it. People were glad to see me because they were glad to see me. No commission structure, no closing technique, no management of the room toward a predetermined outcome. I was there, and the rounds were coming, and the evening was good, and the goodness was attributed to me in a way that the showroom, despite the best years on the plaques, had never quite managed to produce. The showroom attributed the goodness to the car. The bar attributed it to Norman. If you have spent 24 years working to be told that your presence makes things better, and you have mostly been told that your product makes things better, the distinction arrives with a force that is difficult to describe without sounding either pathetic or like a man in a therapy session. And I am neither of those things. And I am telling you anyway, because the force of the distinction is the specific mechanism of this particular ruin, and without it the number makes no sense. Year 2, 2018, 28,000. The increase was not a decision. It was the natural next size of a thing that had been growing without being examined. I had expanded the table, where in year 1 the rounds had covered 4 or 5 regular faces. By year 2 there were 9 or 10, because I was known by then, and being known is the drug, and the drug requires the dose to increase to produce the same effect, and I increased the dose without ever consciously deciding to. Barry had brought a friend from Wolverhampton who was visiting. The friend went back to Wolverhampton. Barry brought another friend. The friends cycled through and the rounds did not pause for the transitions. In the second year I also started buying for the staff more regularly. Not the ladies' drinks, not the mechanism you are imagining, but the staff tips and the drinks that said I appreciate what this place does for me. And the staff responded by knowing my name at the door. And knowing my name at the door is worth more to a man who sold cars for 24 years than you might expect, because a car salesman's entire professional life is spent working to be known. And in Pattaya in 2018 I was known, and it felt, honestly, like winning. Year 3, 2019, 31,000. The capital at the end of year 3 was approximately £57,000, which a man with a calculator could tell you was running at an exit somewhere around 2021, if nothing changed. Nothing changed. I want to give you the mechanics of the escalation, because I spent more each year does not describe it accurately enough to be useful. The escalation was not a decision to spend more. It was a series of decisions, each of which was individually reasonable, that produced a total which was unreasonable. Let me give you the specific ones from 2019 as an example year. In March, I started going to a second bar on a Thursday, because a man I liked from the Soy 7 table had a Thursday arrangement at a place in the Walking Street area, and going once a week added approximately 3,000 baht a week, which is 12,000 a month, which is 144,000 baht a year, which is about 3,300 pounds, which is about 10% of my starting capital, which I did not calculate that way at the time. I calculated it as 3,000 baht on a Thursday, which is a beer and a round, which is nothing. In June, I hosted a birthday for a man I knew from the bar. I organized the venue, I paid for the drinks, I organized the cake, which cost 450 baht, and which I insisted on despite being told it was not necessary. And the evening cost 12,000 baht and produced a warmth in the room that was honestly the feeling I spent the entire rest of 2019 trying to recreate. In September, I went to the airport to pick up Barry's friend from England who was visiting, because I had the only man at the table with a regular car, and the trip cost nothing financially and established me, permanently, as the man who does things like that, which is an identity maintenance cost that does not appear in any accounting, but that runs continuously. By December 2019, I had spent £31,000, and I had not made any expensive decisions. I had made about 60 cheap ones. Year 3, 2019, 31,000. I ran the number once, in February 2020, on a Saturday morning, and the number looked wrong, so I closed the laptop. This is the specific act I most want to describe to you, not because it is unusual, but because it is the most universal act in this kind of story. I closed the laptop. Not because I did not understand the number, because I understood it exactly, and the understanding was incompatible with who I had become on Soy 7, and it was easier to close the laptop than to be, on a Saturday morning, the man who had to become smaller. Bar salesmen do not close the laptop. That is the thing the plaques in the wardrobe did not teach me. The pandemic was 2020 and 2021. My pandemic is not interesting and it is also relevant, and I will give you both of those things honestly. The bars closed. Pattaya was, for significant periods, genuinely shut. I spent the lockdown months in my condo in a way that should, by arithmetic, have been restorative. No bar spending, reduced costs. Capital preservation. The capital preserved was approximately £13,000 across the full closed period. I need to give you the pandemic months in more detail, because they are the evidence I have been sitting with since September 2023 and that I have not known what to do with. For the first 3 months of the lockdown, I was restless in the specific way of a man whose routine has been removed and who has not yet understood that the routine was the problem. I walked the beach at 4 in the morning because there was nothing else to do. I ate from the 7-Eleven. I watched things on my laptop. I reorganized the wardrobe. And then, around month 4, something shifted. Not dramatically, not as a realization, and I found the market, and I started cooking, and I discovered that I could spend a Wednesday morning buying vegetables, and an hour in the afternoon preparing a meal, and 2 hours in the evening eating it slowly and reading, and that the Wednesday had been enjoyable in a way that bore no relationship to how enjoyable it was to buy 8 rounds on a Tuesday. The 12-baht tomatoes and the 60-baht chicken, and the 45 minutes of cooking produced a feeling that I recognized from somewhere and that took me several days to identify correctly, which was satisfaction, not approval, not being known, not the warmth of a room turning toward me, but the specific satisfaction of doing something competently for no audience. I had not felt that since the plaques in 1999 and 2003. I tell you this because it is the most useful thing in this recording, and because I have not told it to anyone else, including Barry. The other life, the life without the rounds, was available inside the pandemic, and it was available to me, and I saw it clearly, and in June 2021 I went back to the bar. The pandemic was 2020 and 2021, because the gap between what the pandemic preserved and what a year of the Solihull 7 table costs is the gap that tells you everything about what the bar was doing. The pandemic gave me the quietest and cheapest 14 months of my Pattaya life. It did not restore the capital because the capital was already gone past the point of restoration by management. What it gave me was the experience of living in Pattaya without the table, and the experience was not what I had feared, which was nothing. It was fine. I walked. I found a market near the condo that I had not known about. I learned to cook 3 things properly because I had nothing else to do, and because the cooking was something to do, and the things I cooked were good, and I ate them alone in the condo in a way that I had been afraid would be unbearable, and that was simply quiet, and the quiet was not terrible. I tell you this because it is the central fact of the pandemic period. The life without the table was survivable, and the life without the table cost £13,000 a year less. I knew this. I went back to the table in June 2021, because the bars opened, and because I went, the way you go back to a thing you have been doing, without deciding to go back. Year 4 was 2021, partial year, about 14,000 from reopening through December. Year 5, 2022, 34,000, which is the highest year, the year when I felt most like the big shot, and when the capital dropped, after that year's spending and some minor medical costs, to about £19,000. Year 6, 2023, I spent 16,000 and ran out. That sentence is the accounting in its final form. I ran out not in a single dramatic moment, but across a period of 4 months in mid-2023, when I was managing the spending down, not shutting it off, managing it down, which is the distinction I made at the time that felt meaningful and that produced exactly the same outcome as shutting it off, only more slowly and with more anxiety. By September 2023, the capital was gone, and the pension was the only income, and the pension covers the rent and the utilities, and the food and the phone, approximately, in a room I moved to from the condo in April, which is 12,000 baht a month, and is not the condo. The last round I bought for the table was on the 3rd of September 2023. I know the date because I noted it, not in advance, not as a declaration, but because I have the habit, from the car dealership, of noting things that feel like the last of their kind. The round was for 7 people. It cost 840 baht. I put the money on the bar in the way I had done it for 6 years. A gesture, not a statement, the movement of a man who is comfortable with a gesture. And I went home, and I came back the next night, and the night after, and the table was still there, and I sat at the end of it, and the drinks were not coming from me, and nobody said anything, and the world continued. I need to say something about the staff, because the staff are always left out of these accounts, and the staff are the most important and least culpable people in the story. The Solihull 7 bar has been staffed, across 7 years, by a rotating cast of women from the north and northeast, most of them in their 20s and 30s, most of them sending money home on a schedule they plan with more precision than I planned my spending, and not one of them ever did anything other than serve the drinks I ordered and thank me for the tips I gave them. And remember, as staff who depend on tips always remember, the preferences and the names of the men who tip generously. They did not manage me. They did not encourage me to spend more. They did their jobs. I tipped too much, because tipping too much is what the big shot does, and the big shot is who I had decided to be, and the deciding was mine alone, and the deciding is the whole story. I want to say this explicitly because the instinct, in retrospect, is to distribute the responsibility, and there is nobody available to receive a share of it. Barry didn't do this to me. The staff didn't do this to me. Pattaya didn't do this to me. A man who spent 24 years learning to read a room walked into a room and misread it as his, and the misreading cost £121,000, and the misreading was entirely his own work. The two men meet on Tuesday evenings, which is when Barry comes in reliably, and when the table has its specific composition of people I have known for years. The first man, the one who arrived in 2017 with £140,000, and the best salesman in the West Midlands plaques, and the identity that the table was built to house, is visible in the room, in the way that things that used to be there are visible in a room, in the shape of the space around where they were. The staff know me. The regulars know me. I am still Norman from the end of the table. What I am not is the man who says drinks are on me, and the not being is a specific presence, a negative space with a name, and I sit in it every Tuesday and think about the car I would have sold a man who walked into the showroom looking exactly like me. What I can tell you, 14 months into the smaller table, is something I could not have told you in 2017, and that I want to tell anyone who is currently sitting at the table with the drinks going out. I want to be honest about the transition, because the channel will give you the ruin and leave out the morning after, and the morning after is where the actual education is. The month after the last round was the worst, and not for the reason I expected. I had imagined humiliation, the regulars noticing, the staff treating me differently, Barry finding somewhere else to be, and none of those things happened, which was almost harder than if they had. The regulars said nothing. The staff said nothing. Barry came in at his usual time and accepted a drink from the man 2 seats from where I was sitting, and said something funny, and left at his usual time. The world in which I had been the big shot simply absorbed the absence of the big shot, with the same efficiency that water fills a space from which something has been removed, and the efficiency was both a relief and a small devastation. I had spent 6 years and £121,000 becoming necessary to a room, and the room, it turned out, had never needed me specifically. It had needed the function, and the function was now performed by other men, and the room was fine. What changed in the second month was something else. I started to see the table from outside it, which you cannot do while you are buying the rounds. When you are the man with the money out, you are the center of a small gravitational field, and the field is what you see. When you sit at the edge of the field with an 80-baht beer, you see the whole thing, and what I saw was a group of men of various ages sitting in a bar in Pattaya on a Tuesday evening, being pleasant company for each other, in a room that nobody owns, and that nobody needed to purchase. The conversations were the same conversations. The laughter was the same laughter. The warmth, such as it is, was genuine and continuous. What had changed was that I no longer understood myself to be the cause of it, and in not being the cause I discovered that I had never been the cause. The room had always been generating its own warmth, and I had been misreading the warmth as a product of my generosity, when it was simply the property of a room full of people who are, in the main, glad to be alive in Pattaya rather than dead in Wolverhampton. What I can tell you, 14 months into the smaller table, the table is still there. I am still at it. The friends, such as they are, in the terms available, are still there. Barry is still there, with redistributed drinks and the same unhurried ease. The people who know my name at the door still know my name. None of that is gone. What is gone is £121,000 and the condo and the 6-year fiction that the identity was self-sustaining. And what I have instead is an 80-baht beer and a table I did not buy my way onto, but that I earned by being there. And if I am honest, and I have committed to honesty in this recording as the only remaining currency I have, the earning is better than the buying was. And I knew that, somewhere, even in 2018 and 2019, and I closed the laptop, and here we are. Let me say the last thing about the two men, because I have introduced them at the beginning, and I owe you the reunion. The first man, the one who arrived with the plaques in his mental luggage, and the £140,000, and the 24 years of reading the room, is not gone. He is sitting at the end of the same table. He still reads the room, still knows which of the Tuesday regulars is in a good mood and which is managing something, still knows the moment a conversation is about to tip into territory that the other person finds uncomfortable and steers it before it does. The skill is intact. What changed is that it is no longer in service of the identity, because the identity is no longer funded, and without the funding the skill has nothing to sell and nothing to protect, and what remains when a salesman has nothing to sell and nothing to protect is, and this surprised me, 14 months in, what was there before the selling? Which is a man from Ladywood who learned at 16 that a room was glad to have him in it, and who, it turns out, does not need to buy the room's gladness. The room is still glad. The beer is 80 baht. The Tuesday table is there. These are the facts available to me at 68, and I am, in the specific sense, available to a man sitting at the smaller table with his 80 baht beer, at 68, in Pattaya, with the plaques in the wardrobe and the cowman guy at the market, and Barry at the far end of the table with somebody else's drink, grateful for all of them, and present for all of them, which is not nothing, and is, I have started to think, the one thing the big shot was never quite managing to be. The advice, since people ask, know the number. Not the annual number, the weekly number. The weekly number is the one that tells you the truth, because the truth about spending in a bar in Thailand is always in the week, never in the year. I spent £300 a week in year 1, and I experienced it as £30 a night across a 6-night week, with one lighter evening, and £30 a night is nothing, and nothing compounds into £121,000 across 6 years. And that arithmetic, stated plainly, is the whole education. Know the weekly number. Write it down. Look at it on a Tuesday morning before you go out on a Tuesday evening. That is all there is. You do not need me to sell you on it. I have been selling things for 46 years, and I know when a sale is made. And if you are still watching this, the sale is made, and the number is in your head already, and the only thing remaining is the Tuesday morning and the piece of paper, and both of those cost nothing, and you already know where Solihull 7 is.